Hello again and welcome back to my channel. Once again, my name is Elise and today I'm going to be doing something I've been doing on here, but I told you guys it was coming. I'm going to be doing my first book review on Making Malcolm, The Myth and Meaning of Malcolm X, written by Michael Eric Dyson. Michael Eric Dyson is a, a professor at Georgetown University. He has a PhD in religion and he is an African American man, and he wrote this book and it was published in 1995. So basically it was published 20 years ago. So there's obviously some differences in from what was written there and what was written now, but there's a lot of like similar comparisons that could be made. So let me just talk about my first impression. So the reason I picked up this book was because I heard him speak on The Breakfast Club. And I know a lot of people have issues with The Breakfast Club because of Charlemagne. And I want to say I agree. I do find him a little bit problematic, but watching him interact with Dr. Dyson was really, really interesting to me. And I really like how eloquent Dr. Dyson was and how he articulated his beliefs, especially when it came to African Americans and students in general looking up stuff on their own. Like, a lot of people don't do that nowadays. They expect Google to tell them everything. And yeah, that's a form of looking up things, but going in depth, asking people, getting that social interaction is a good way to really get that type of information that you may have never found on Google. You know, there are some things you can't find on Google, like other people's opinions in your own private circle that can help you learn and engage with the community. So I really just liked the way he was speaking. It was like an hour long interview. I'm going to put it in my bio, obviously, so you guys can go and check it out if you want to. The first 10 minutes really I really gravitated toward him in the first 10 minutes because he talked about this meeting between Bobby Kennedy and civil rights leaders. I think Lena Hansberry was there, the lady that wrote, what's it called? The lady that wrote A Raisin in the Sun. Yeah, Raisin in the Sun was there. Some other public civil rights leaders were there, and how they had this huge conversation about civil rights. And Bobby Kennedy asked them a question like, well, you know, I'm Irish and we already have a president. And, you know, they fired back at him. Well, you know, we're black. We've been here for, you know, generations, you know, multiple decades, and we don't have a president. So, like, obviously the system is systematic. So that to African Americans and students in general looking up stuff on their own. Like, a lot of people don't do that nowadays. They expect Google to tell them everything. And yeah, that's a form of looking up things, but going in depth, asking people, getting that social interaction is a good way to really get that type of information that you may have never found on Google. You know, there are some things you can't find on Google, like other people's opinions in your own private circle that can help you learn and engage with the community. So I really just liked the way he was speaking. It was like an hour long interview. I'm going to put it in my bio, obviously, so you guys can go and check it out if you want to. The first 10 minutes really I really gravitated toward him in the first 10 minutes because he talked about this meeting between Bobby Kennedy and civil rights leaders. I think Lena Hansberry was there, the lady that wrote, what's it called? The lady that wrote A Raisin in the Sun. Yeah, Raisin in the Sun was there. Some other public civil rights leaders were there, and how they had this huge conversation about civil rights. And Bobby Kennedy asked them a question like, well, you know, I'm Irish and we already have a president. And, you know, they fired back at him. Well, you know, we're black. We've been here for, you know, generations, you know, multiple decades, and we don't have a president. So, like, obviously the system is systematic. So that whole retelling of that story in his book, The Truth, is coming out. And I wanted to get a kind of feeling of what his previous books were before I dived into something completely different in a completely different context and written in this day and age. So I called my library. I live in rural Southwest Virginia, and I didn't expect them to have anything, but it's on the college campus, so they actually had a couple of books. So I picked up this one and 3 other ones, and I returned the other 3 when I was like halfway, because I was like, this is kind of dense for me personally. I like books that I can just easily get into, vibe with, connect with. And from reading this in the beginning, I was just like, yeah, I'm just going to take them other books back. I was a little bit too ambitious on my reading journey. My intent is to read 22 books before I turn 22, which is in November. So I definitely feel like I was too ambitious picking up 4 of his books. and I took 3 of them back. And since this one was the smallest, I kept this one because I was like, well, I'm already making my way through it, so I'm just gonna keep going. And so that's what really motivated me. And I'll just like talk a little bit about what notes I've taken. So the reason I say this book is a little dense is because there's a lot of vocabulary in it that I wasn't familiar with. Now, I'm 21 years old. I have a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies, focusing in psychology and biology, and I also have a minor in health and aging. So I've done a lot of reading. Um, I I'm not saying like I'm above anybody or anything like that, but I say it was dense for the average reader because if somebody doesn't have, a bachelor's degree, and I'm on my way to my master's, so if somebody isn't on that track or whatever, and I can't even understand some of the words, I have to go ahead and I got a journal to write down the words because I wanted to share some with you all, and then I also wanted to learn as well. And that's why, like, when I got halfway through the book, I was like, I don't know if I want to keep reading this because I feel like it's purposely counting me out. Like, it's trying to weed out people like me from continuing to read this book. And after a while, when I got closer to I would say maybe 3/4 done, I realized, like, no, I think he did this to, like, really help educate people like me or educate people that are not like me, because he would continuously use the words over and over again. So it wasn't like he was just throwing stuff in to make it seem like, he was trying to be higher than thou. It was because he wanted people to really learn the language of how he speaks. And it showed to me, like, okay, he's not just throwing around these words. He actually knows what they mean. And I could tell that from his interview. But, reading somebody's book is different from listening to them talk. Some people like people in person versus they don't like their books at all. So I have so this is like my journal. I kept the vocab on this side. Sorry, I ripped some of it out. Vocab on this side, and then the quotes I found interesting on the other side. So as you can tell, I have about 3.5 pages of vocabulary. There's only one word that I could not recognize, but I'm just going to be honest and saying, like, there are some words in here that I didn't know. For instance, juxtaposition. I didn't know what that meant. It means the fact of two things being seen or placed close together with contrasting effect. Interregnum, a period when normal government is suspended, especially between successive reigns and regimes. Epochal, forming of a period of time in history or a person's life, typically one marked by noticeable events, particular characteristics. And then there's one more word. Oh, itinerant, travels from place to place. Me and my boyfriend actually got really upset about this because I was like, well, why didn't he just say nomad? Like, why didn't he just do that? And then there's another example I want to give, and I feel like maybe this is why context is important. Griots, that's the last vocab word I'm going to give you all. I think it's griots, a member of a class of traveling poets, musicians, and storytellers who maintain a tradition of history in parts of West Africa. So we can say nomads for that, but it's deeper than that when it comes to context. Obviously, they're related to West African ancestry. They're poets, musicians, and stories. They're artists just traveling. They're not just nomads going from place to place, maybe trying to find a job or like, they have an intent purpose of sharing a cultural relevancy. So that's why I just felt like close to the end of the book, like, he's trying to teach us something. He's not just trying to pull one over on our eyes. He's not trying to be holier than thou. He's really trying to make a connection. Some quotes that really talked to me is one of them was in like the preface. So I'm going to try and do like my quotes with like the preface, the middle of the book, the end of the book, and the afterward. So in the preface, Michael Eric Dyson didn't say this, but Stephen Sanders did. He met him at a conference, and Stephen Sanders is not an American. He's from Netherlands, I believe. And so he made this comment about Malcolm X. He said, the real dilemma is that being a Black American, as Malcolm called himself, means that he was born an American. So America is a part of him. Question is how one can definitely free oneself from the colonizer while recognizing that the colonizer is within you. And I just want to say this really connected with me because if you even think about, like, let's say for example, Colin Kaepernick, maybe that's why Colin Kaepernick decided to take his stand the way he did. People always wanted to call out his connection to patriotism, but it's the fact that maybe he loves his country so much and realizes the wrong in his country that he decided to do something about it. And that's how he's freeing himself from the colonizer and choosing to free others from the colonizer in such a public way and make a statement. I definitely appreciate that. Another quote, if you know anything about Malcolm X, from what I knew about Malcolm X was that he was, he was the type of activist that was like by any means necessary. That's what his famous quote was. And people always talk about that. MLK was nonviolent, and Malcolm X was, violent. He wanted to protest defensively, to get things done. And they always talk about him being separatist, like trying to create a community for the black people that was separate from the white society. But people never talk about after he made his journey to Mecca as a Muslim, part of his religion, that he transformed that to black nationalism. And I connect with that. Like, we have so much pride in our own culture and the country we live in. Like, it's amazing. And I feel like that's really important. When he changed his views, it's because he met white Muslims on his journey to Mecca. And he realized, not all white people are bad. It's not about being separate, but like finding a stable part where we can be ourselves and we can have our own pride while still exuding passion and pride in the nationalism in general. So Michael Eric Dyson, he quotes on page 80, "Black nationalism is a response of racial solidarity to the divisive practices of white supremacist nationalism." And I thought about that, and I was like, that's deep. That's deep. Because we're trying to create this solidarity because we've been kicked and bruised and abused for so long. And, people want to say, oh, why don't you just blend into our culture? Why don't you just assimilate like other minorities have been? And it's like, well, it's a reaction, a response to what has been done to us to create this own solidarity. And even till this day, like, I've had someone come to me and be like, I don't understand why y'all have to be African Americans. Why can't y'all just be Americans and, stop having y'all separate culture? Somebody has told that to me last year, actually, last year, the end of last year. Somebody told me that, a fellow coworker, and I was very taken aback because my pride in my African American culture is not affected by my pride in my American culture. I can still have pride in American culture while having pride in the fact that I have African ancestry. Even though I'm not 100% sure what tribe or what country I come from, I can still have pride in that. Another important quote was from Patricia Hill Collins, and she says, Malcolm X's treatment of gender reflected the widespread belief of his time that, like race, men and women's roles were natural, were rooted in biological difference. And Michael Eric Dyson beautifully states this. Like, when I reached the middle of the book, I was getting a little tired, but when he started talking about feminism and how the black men can in turn impress the black women, I thought that was like a real connection, especially in all the Facebook groups I'm in and devoted to black women. We feel that we get oppressed by black men because they feel like we're the enemy when we're not. If anything, we're trying to be your equal. We're trying to push you to be the best part of yourself. And sometimes we don't feel that reciprocated. So to feel like this was written in the 90s, and it's still happening today, that's what I mean. It's not as disconnected as we think it is. A lot of the stuff is still going on. This was page 175, and as you can see, the book is not this big. It's only this big. The greatest mistake of the movement has been trying to organize a sleeping people around specific goals. You have to wake the people up to their humanity, to their own worth, and to their heritage. And this was Malcolm X from Malcolm X Speaks. And this is really connecting to today because we always talk about being awoke and being aware. You can't organize sleeping people. If you tell people let's go out and protest, but they don't know what they're protesting for, that same passion isn't going to be there. You have to connect them to their humanity. Say this is our obligation as humans and to our heritage to protest for police brutality and the school to prison pipeline. Get in contact to the movement. Really wake up and see what's going on. Don't just follow. Just don't follow to follow. That's not how this is supposed to work, And sleeping people aren't going to be as loyal. They're gonna, something new comes along, they're just gonna follow that. They don't stay focused. They're not focused enough on their humanity and their heritage and the issue at hand to be consistent. So I think that's a really good point he makes. Another one, this was in the afterword. At every stage of our sojourn, that means temporary stay, I didn't know what that meant, on American soil, Black folk have appealed to a time largely mythical and unquestionably romantic when we were better than we are in whatever age in which we happen to be struggling. This understandable strategy of moral regeneration by hearkening to past ideals is sometimes helpful, and as we're now discovering, sometimes quite harmful. And this was on page 182, and this was from Michael Eric Dyson himself. And as a professor, as a college professor, he clearly knows what it's like to work with students and work with people that are generations younger than him. And I think this point is certainly valid, because even now they talk about millennials and how we're this and how we have it so much easier, but they don't even look at how we struggle. I mean, they don't even look at how we struggle and what our struggle is like. They just want to compare it to theirs. And of course, like he says, it can be helpful, because if we try to make that connection with someone in a younger generation and try to learn how their struggle is, we can possibly relate it to our own struggle and build that bond and try to help them grow. But if we're just hearkening at them and we're not being helpful, then it's irrelevant. Like, there's no point to continuously do that. And then the last words that he utters in the book, which I found is a really great ending, is we can continue to reinvent ourselves by our willingness to think and do the impossible in the name of the inextinguishable hope that moved our ancestors to dream and act with great boldness. We too can triumph like Malcolm by any means necessary. And I think that was a great way to end the book. Honestly, I would give this book, I would say like a 7.5 out of 10, because it ended beautifully. I learned a lot of things. I felt like really connected as a Black woman to what he was saying, especially when he talked about a lot of the movies he talks about in references in this book. I don't know if you guys have heard of Michael Eric Dyson, but he talks a lot about, when it comes to Black culture, like hip hop and movies. And in this time, like Juice was out, some Spike Lee movies, popular Spike Lee movies, Harlem Nights were out. Like, they were widely popularized. And he talks a lot about that struggle of Black male masculinity and how that relates to Malcolm X, because, we see Malcolm as what typical Black men aim to be, especially Black male youth. Like, we see his vision in that context. So he talks a lot about those movies, and he talks about, well, why hasn't there been, in this time, a movie on the Black woman and her struggle for freeing from oppression and, getting out of the hood, and I feel like he's valid in that. One particular point, one movie I have seen is Poetic Justice, and he said, there was poetic justice, but halfway through the movie, Tupac Shakur comes in and he takes the limelight from, what's her name, Janet Jackson. I was about to say Jada Pinkett Smith, Janet Jackson. He takes the limelight from her. So even Black women in that film, have struggled with depression and suicidal ideologies and the loss of their mother, their matriarch. That gets stolen from us for a man. More so when it comes to Janet Jackson, like, I want to see more of her emotional side. Like, I would have loved to see that. And so it just gets stifled. And now, of course, we have a lot of movies and shows. You got Insecure. I just watched another Breakfast Club interview with Amanda Seales, and that was really good. You got She's Gotta Have It that just came back out. So we just have to overcome this. I really liked, for instance, in Living Single. I always want to say in Living Color. Living Single, I like that example as well. But anyway, just getting back to the book at hand, that's why I would rate it a 7.5 out of 10, because he touches on that toxic masculinity that we learn about every single day. Black women making more and being more educated. So I just want to finish this here because I'm hitting like the 20-minute mark. I hope this was very thorough. I hope it wasn't too long. If you have any questions about it, please hit me up. Like I said, if you choose to read this book, I'm just letting you know, keep going. Because at first I was going to stop, and somebody said, keep going. Put the video up, we'll watch it. So I put it up. So once again, my name is Elise. Thank you for watching.